So, welcome. I'm happy to be here and talk about design tokens today. So, first of all, just a few words about myself. I'm a freelancer working on front ends and on the UI UX side of things. And that's probably exactly why I'm interested into design token, because in my experience, it exactly happens at the intersection of design and code, as you will see later on. I also host a meetup in Hamburg. If you're interested, it will take place on 9th of November. So let's talk about the evolution of design tokens. And so it's a little bit about the history and where we come from. So we go back all the way to the early 90s, to the first days of the web. So in 1919, the first web browser was released. And back at that time, CSS just did not exist. So there was no way to style your HTML documents. So authors were asking for ways to style their pages, but yeah, CSS was not a thing. A fun fact, this is the first website, and as you can see, it's already some kind of responsive. So you could use it on a phone, I guess, without CSS involved. So, but back in those days, when CSS did not exist, one emerging approach was to use presentational HTML and attributes. So as you can see here, we have a element that's just there for the purpose of styling your document. So we have a multi-col element with the attribute culs and gutter. And inside our p tag, we have a font element with size and color attributes. So that was one way. And obviously, that only had one advantage. I mean, you could in some way style your documents, but there were drawbacks. As Finn told us in the previous talk, HTML is a markup language, so it's responsible for structure and semantics. And here we have mixed this up because HTML also was responsible for styling, and that's not good, especially because you had to repeat yourself over and over again. You had to add those elements, and this was hard to maintain, as you could imagine. So CSS level 1 to the rescue. So CSS was introduced in 1996. And yeah, CSS introduced the separation of structure and semantics, HTML on the one side, and the presentation layer, CSS, on the other side. And CSS had some really powerful features that will also help us to understand what design tokens solve, and that is inheritance and reusable classes. So most of you working in web development might be familiar with this. So whenever I change typography-related values, such as color or font family, those values are inherited by child elements. So it's as simple as changing the font family on my body element to a serif font and to change the color, and all elements on my entire page will change. That's really powerful, and that gives us some kind of global control of our styles already in 1996, just with CSS level 1. Also, we have reusable classes, so really helpful to combine different properties for typography presets, for example. So we can reuse these combinations over again. And yeah, that's a thing I heard of. It's exactly how Tailwind works, if you like it or not. It's really popular. So you would reuse classes and apply them to your HTML. So what we gained was now we have a separation of concerns. So structure is dealt by HTML and the presentation by CSS. And we have some kind of global control with inheritance and the possibility to reuse classes. And that brings us less repetition in the end. So that's definitely a major step. And how did we do this? I think we shifted the responsibility from HTML to CSS. And now we're distributing our design decisions, that's a term I will explain later on, via CSS to our HTML. So an important thing to note, it's not perfect yet because we still have big inconsistencies at value level. So if you have hex color values and have to reapply them over again, there may be inconsistencies. That's definitely a thing. And not all properties can be inherited. So it's mostly typography-related properties. Background color, for example, border radius, properties like that cannot be inherited. And also, I think a raw value, if you have a hex color value, for example, I mean, HSL is better, but even then, it doesn't really provide a semantic meaning. So you don't tell any one of your coworkers what this color code is intended to be used. So that's also a drawback, I think. And yeah, that's a popular example. So that's an interface inventory taken by Brad Frost. And I hope you can see the inconsistencies. So we have many different versions, different border radii, font families, and colors. So that may happen if you maintain your values manually. But now we have modern CSS, and that's not the way we work in CSS anymore. And we have variables. So variables allow you to store values in one place and add references across the project. We already know this from 2007 when it was introduced by SAS, but now we have CSS custom properties. And we also know this, so speaking about design tools, we know this from Sketch and Figma and other tools. We define our styles globally and add references in our documents. Custom properties are key value pairs. And yeah, as I said, you can reuse your values across your application or your tech stack. And one thing I really like about custom properties is they allow you to apply some semantic meaning to your values. I will show this later on because this is an important concept when talking about design tokens. So this is a basic example. You would define your gray 200 color tone somewhere in a global CSS file probably, and then reuse it whenever you need it. And that's what I meant with semantic meaning. So if we compare these examples, I think the second one, when I call it color text primary, also tells us much about the intention, how the designer probably wanted us to use that color. That's an advantage of applying names to values. Also, we can manage our values globally, and by establishing an architecture where we reference our values and apply meaning to them, we can create themes quite easily by just switching values for a specific theme. So, yeah, benefit, we now have a single source of truth for our design decisions. I'll explain this term later on, but still we're inside one tech stack. So what I told you will just work if you're working on your digital product inside that product, but it can't go outside your tech stack that way easily. yeah, a benefit is as well that we have global control. We can reference our custom properties, which opens convenient options for theming and white labeling. And I think the added semantic meaning could also help you to collaborate in a better way. So how did we do that? I think we shifted the responsibility for our values to the custom global custom properties. And now we distribute these design decisions with some kind of CSS-backed source of truth. Now our values can be consistent inside one tech stack. But still, and now I think we come to the real problem. So at this point, probably many people work in a design tool like Figma, and you have probably an app, a marketing site, and different platforms. And the design tool and your code is probably not in sync. Also, different platforms, whether you're working for Android, iOS, the web platform, you require different formats for specific styles. So this might also not be in sync. And changing that can be time consuming, and inconsistencies can occur because there's no single responsibility. So it's not the designer who changes a value and everything is propagated to the final deployed product. So it's communication is involved. The designer might talk to developers. They have to edit some values manually, and errors are more likely if you have many platforms to deal with. One example would be Spotify. In 2015, they had a major rebranding, and they just changed the green tone among some other things, but it took them several months to just change the color of the green tone within all their platforms. So that was not really a good way to do it. And in 2018, they already had 200 designers, 2,000 engineers, 45 different platforms, including a smart fridge, and 22 different design systems. So doing this manually wasn't an option anymore. So they had to find a new solution to tackle this problem, to make design changes, to change them simultaneously across multiple platforms. That was one challenge. And another one I experience in my daily work is keeping your design tool, your code source, and your documentation in sync automatically. That's another challenge. And that's the reason why we talk about design tokens. So, and first of all, I'm really interested. Who of you has heard about design tokens? Okay. And who's using design tokens in a, okay. Yeah, interesting. All right. So design tokens. First, let's try to define what a design token is. I was told it's almost a religious debate, but I will try to stick to the definition by the W3C working group. But first of all, the term was coined by Gina N. She was working at the Salesforce Lightning design system. And their goal was to scale a design across many different platforms. And a simple definition would be design tokens are named design decisions. But I don't want to stick to a simple definition, so that's why I chose the W3C design tokens community group definition. And there are many aspects that might be of interest here. So what they would define it, design tokens are a methodology for expressing design decisions in a platform agnostic way so that they can be shared across different disciplines, tools, technologies. They help establish a common vocabulary across organizations. First, I thought it's a bit complicated because so many pieces, different interesting aspects inside. And I thought it's probably a good idea to break this down and to better understand what design tokens are. So design decisions platform agnostic, shared across different disciplines, tools, and technologies, and the common vocabulary that's shared. So design decisions, I used that term, and actually it's not really that complicated. It's what makes a brand unique, it's what color you choose, what typeface you prefer, is all the decisions you make, typically in art direction or when working on brand design. So that's what it is. And I think when you see this image, it's clear. It's the purple color tone you chose for your button background, your text color, your typeface, letter spacing, all that. All what makes your brand unique would be a design decision. Brad Frost, I don't know if you've heard about atomic design, he would say tokens are subatomic particles. So the smallest pieces of a design and also the smallest pieces of a design system. So it's what components are composed of design tokens. That's design decisions. Platform agnostic means our goal is we want to change it in one place and let it propagate to all our platforms. So we cannot use platform-specific syntax. That's why design tokens are typically JSON files. Also, tokens don't live inside a specific tech stack. They live outside in some kind of repository. Outside your tech stack, so it allows that enables you to push changes to other platforms, and that's also why we need a translation layer. So design tokens are typically JSON, and not every tech stack can consume that out of the box and translate it. So we have a translation layer in between. That's platform agnostic. JSON and living outside your tech stack. And design tokens are shared across different disciplines. And that means I think design tokens also enable different stakeholders to come closer together. So even product managers can come together with designers and developers and talk about these decisions more clearly. Also, code editor, design tool, and documentation are connected by design tokens and shared across technologies, no matter whether you work on native apps or the web platform, or even for print, you can use tokens to generate the desired output. Common vocabulary, that's an example I already had with CSS custom properties. Your design decisions are named. So gray 100, gray 200 already says more about probably our lightness and darkness than our hex color value. But then again, we can also apply semantic meaning and call it color brand, for example, and that's improves the shared vocabulary. Also, token allow us to easily keep our documentation in sync. That's another point when talking about common vocabulary. All right, so let's have a look at the anatomy of a token. I have to say there's no official standard yet. So there is the community group, but it's not an official W3C group. There are slightly diverging formats, and the community group is working on a standard, but no one knows for sure if there will ever be a standard. So, but there are many big companies in that group. So it's Microsoft, Apple, Google, and others, Baidu, Amazon, they're in that group. Also Gina N of Salesforce and others, Figma. So they're working towards a standard, and hopefully we'll see a standard one day. That's how their token looks like right now in their specs. So a token has a name, and then in its simplest form, it has a value. A property value and the assigned value. But that's not all. You could organize your tokens in a meaningful way. So you have tokens for color, for spacing, for typography, for radii. So you could group them by assigning a different type. Tokens can have a description about their intended use case and some metadata if you want to provide additional information. That would be an example of a token with some more properties. So we have a value, a type of color, and a description probably about its intended use case. And then really powerful are composite tokens. That's a design token that's made up of multiple values. And you need that, for example, when working with typography. So it wouldn't make sense to just have a font size on its own. You probably would also group a line height, a font weight, and other font-related attributes to that token. So that's how it looks like. I think not too unfamiliar, so it's really easy in the beginning to understand that we group different related values together and apply it to probably our largest headline here. And probably the most powerful concept in the world of tokens are alias tokens. So that means a token can reference another token, and that powerful concept helps you in building themes or multiple brands with just one token base and adding new layers on top of that. And that's exactly what the next chapter is about. So it's about the benefits of tokens. In the end, I think it's all about saving time and achieving consistency. And especially when we talk about saving time, I think a way to organize your tokens that you can reuse them probably across different projects is really helpful. So typically, you would have not only a single collection of tokens describing your choices of color or typeface, you would typically have several layers of abstraction. So to make it less abstract, I'll show you what I mean. So here you can see our raw values at the bottom. So this is just our value, not tokenized. And then we have level 1, our base or core tokens. Sometimes Figma calls them primitives. It's just the available choices, the options we have to create a design. But there's no meaning. It's just an option. Level 2 is semantic. So right now we think about how we want to use that purple 500 color tone. Does it signal interaction, for example? Is it some typography foreground color or background color? So that's our level 2. And finally, we can also implement component tokens that are just scoped to specific components. So here's another representation about that. So you can see level 1 is our option, just a purple 500 color tone that has no meaning. Then we choose to apply some semantic meaning, color interactive, and in the end, it is used as our button primary background. And this is made possible by the concept of aliasing. So the color interactive token is a reference to purple 500, and the button primary background token is a reference to the color interactive token. And with this concept, you can build a dark theme. For example, if you have a bright theme with this logic set up, you can build a dark theme real quick. And I'll have a demo later on, so I can show you how this works in practice. Just a quick side note, so naming all these tokens. So this is really just a simple example. So in most design systems, tokens are not named like that. So color interactive is probably, for most design systems, too short. So most companies have some kind of taxonomy. So as you can see here, token type, what element, attribute, purpose, or also the state. So most companies have some kind of system for naming their tokens. It's definitely a thing we could talk weeks, if not months about. And some people say you need to get this perfect. Others would say just get started and improve it along the way. So I'm not an expert on that because I know Nathan Curtis, and he's definitely the expert. If you want to know anything about how to name your tokens, and he analyzed all these design systems. And yeah, he has a great article on Medium where you can read all about naming systems for tokens. That's how tokens look like in Figma. So Figma just introduced token support. They called it variables, which seemed to be strange for some people working in that area, but actually it's tokens, and you can do everything I just told you now in the design tool. So it's not something a developer can do, it's something a designer can do. A designer can set up this 2 or 3 level system with options on the ground level, then apply semantic meaning, and then really quickly create some themes in Figma, especially. And this was possible by using a plugin in the past. Now you can use it natively. There are some drawbacks. I'll come back to that later on. So this is the designer's perspective. So I have a card component or a combination, a group of card components. I just drag it in my dark frame, and it immediately gets dark. I change modes here, so it's the same I would do in the code, I can now do in Figma. So I change themes, I apply meaning to my variables, and it's a matter of minutes to just create a high contrast theme, for example, alongside the dark theme. So I think tokens are really powerful for designers because it saves you lots of time. So you could also use it to store language strings in your modes or themes. So as time runs, I come to the distribution. So now you have your tokens in your design tool, and you have your tokens in your code, but that doesn't help you. So you want a single source of truth outside your design tool, outside your tech stack, where you develop your app or website. So you need some other source for that. And that's probably the most important screen to understand the benefit of tokens or the whole architecture. So what you see here, you have your platform agnostic tokens saved in JSON files in a repository or managed by design system management tool, for example. Then, before you can use it, before your digital products or Figma can consume it, you need a translation layer in between. So a layer that translates JSON to XML, to Swift, to JavaScript, to Sass, to custom properties. That's what you have in between. And finally, you get consumable code that all your apps can understand, because you have a translation layer in between that guarantees no matter what you throw in, it can be translated in the end. That's another representation about that. There are specialized tools like Style Dictionary or Theo, but you also have some really powerful management systems for that, like Specify or Supernova. Yeah, that's just a quick demo of Style Dictionary by Amazon. I change one color value here from 333 to F5, yeah, something, hit save, and I immediately get the code for my Android app, custom properties for my website, and JS consts here, and even Sass variables. And this, there are many exporters, or sometimes they're called parsers, available. So really, I think this is the point where you really get independent. And I talked to people, they switched entire tech stacks without needing too much time to migrate their design to the new tech stack, because of the fact that their design system was living outside and powered by tokens. So that saves you time. This is just the same concept. Yeah, I've got my alpha and my color values here split up in different channels. And I just use specify here to convert it to Flutter, React, Tailwind, CSS. So I can use it in my different tech stacks. This is Token Studio. This was the way we used to work in Figma before they had native tokens. And yeah, you can see I can change just by adding some theming, I can change my entire screen. And for designers, I think this is really something new. And it saves much time. This is how a designer, and that's also quite new, would push code, writing commit message, creating a new branch. The designer pushes code right from within Figma to a repository and probably triggers a whole build chain then, if you want. So for a designer, I think there's a need to think more like a developer. So here's another thing, how would Figma and the final output relate to one another? So yeah, just because I want to conclude this, and I also want to tell you more about some drawbacks, and time is running. So on the design side, we have Figma native implementation, we have Token Studio, we have these translation tools, and we have design management tools that give you transformation management of tokens out of the box. You can also host your components there, your documentation in some of these tools. It's really powerful. That's how it looks like. All right, so I'll try to evaluate the token concept. So what I think, if you're a designer, so this is a whole new way of working. So you have a much more systematic approach to deal with your designs. You would almost need a developer mindset with how to name things, organize, reference, versioning, writing commit messages, and that's, I think, a good thing. And it will save you lots of time, and it will give you more power because you can own a design decisions. If you change a color, you can trigger the build chain right from within Figma now if your company wants this to be the case. So I would definitely recommend to work with a token-based workflow in your design tool now. For developers, you would outsource your design decisions to a platform agnostic source of truth, and that leads to more independence. So your design lives outside your tech stack, and you can migrate it to other tech stacks. That's the benefit. Just single point adjustments. So if you need to propagate your decisions to different platforms, you can do that with an architecture like that. You save manual effort, and also a more systematic approach to theming and branding. For teams, and that's probably the biggest benefit, more clarity, because you have now a single source of truth. All your decisions have a name. You share the same vocabulary, and this can lead to more consistencies and clearer responsibilities. But I also wanted to think about some drawbacks. So I think naming tokens can be a hard thing. So I hope there will be more templates to get started quickly in the future. Setting everything up might take time, depending on your workflows and stacks. Also for small projects, probably it might be over-engineering. And some people say it limits your creativity. And an example I found, sometimes you need odd values to, for example, for optical centering, optical sizing, you probably need 7 pixel values, and in design system, usually you won't find these odd values, I think. Another drawback, Figma doesn't have full support yet, so we're still waiting for typography-related tokens, composite tokens to be precise. It will come this year, I was told. Also, standardization is still in progress. That's still a thing. We don't know if there will be a standard. And I mean, how often will you really change your entire set of colors and typographic choices? So that's also something to consider. Will you really need an architecture like that? So final thing, I think we now shifted the responsibility to an agnostic source of truth outside our tech stack and outside our design tool and our documentation, and now distribute design decisions to multiple tools and platforms. So, and that's also what Spotify did. They connected their design systems. They have many design systems running. They connected them using tokens, and that enabled them to propagate their decisions quicker to platforms like the Smart Fridge and others in one go. So yeah, to conclude, or my personal conclusion would be design tokens are an invitation for designers and developers to work more closely together. that's my personal conclusion for that. So, and I want to end this talk by saying, please don't do handouts. I was told it's a boomerang, and I think it's true. So it's better to stay in touch, don't work in silos, and constantly learn from each other. So that's it for my talk. Thank you.